Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with the expatriate, Charles Coulombe.
Well, I can't really argue with that one. I certainly am expatriate. Here I am in the realm of the empire, in the rightful possessions of the House of Habsburg, emperors of Austria, kings of Hungary, Bohemia, Galicia, Lodomeria, Dalmatia, Jerusalem, grand princes of Transylvania, kings of Croatia. I forgot Croatia. Heavens to Betsy. Holy Roman emperors, golly Moses, all that stuff.
Yeah, well, I went with expatriate, but I was considering turncoat, Charles Coulombe.
Turncoat? Turncoat?
Yeah.
Why? Because I've returned to the sources. Is that it?
The sources? What is that?
Excuse me, the sources, the mother continent, where we all come from?
Where we all come from? Well, that's...
Where we all come from, Mr. Italian, Hungarian, Slovak.
Oh, okay.
What did you think you were? Who did you think you were?
Well,
Big Chief Ray in the face?
Well, you weren't
Lord
including...
of the Paiutes?
You weren't including all people. You're just including me, so... That's selectively inclusive there, Charles.
It's not selectively inclusive. You have any European blood, and that's the vast majority of Americans. This is where you come from. And if you speak a European language, wear European clothing, use European technology, eat European food, and and use European medicine, let's not forget that, and above all, are a member of a religion centered in Europe, then you know what? Bad news, Buttercup. You're a European.
All
Live
right.
with it. I don't care if you want to wave the stars and stripes, or the Canadian red ensign, or the Australian or New Zealand blue ensign, or the Brazilian funny green flag, or the Mexican eagle and the cactus, or anything you want to wave. If you do all the things I just said, you am a European.
I'm an American, Charles.
Well, sure, of course you're an American. And there are Canadians, and there are British, and there are Italians, and there are Swiss. The great European family that goes all the way across the globe includes Americans too.
Okay.
Unless you're going to speak to me in an indigenous language, wear a breech clout, and, kind of get rid of that whole computer thing you got going. Go to the shaman when you're sick. I guess not. I guess not.
The shaman? Is that how you say it?
The shaman. Or you could say shaman. Some people say shaman. I say shaman.
That's what you call your shaman?
I call my shaman a shaman.
Yeah.
But you can call him whatever you want to call him. Anyway, as long as he produces better results than mere antibiotics.
Yeah, your local shaman. Yeah.
Support your local shaman.
Support your local shaman.
let him drive the wicked spirits of illness out of you. Who needs all those antibiotics and all that European garbage? Oh, you go to a sweat lodge, you'll be fine. It's fine. It'll cure the cancer right out of you. It will.
Okay.
No, I'm serious. It'll be fine. Don't worry about anything. Same with dentistry. It'll be great.
Excellent. So what's new, Charles?
Well, let me see. Of course, I miss the Tumblr House Tower like nobody's business.
Of course.
I do get reports from time to time from, I don't want to say disgruntled employees. We'll say they're gruntled.
Yeah.
They're gruntled employees, which is sort of good. If it's the opposite of disgruntled, then it's good.
Okay. What about?
Well,
and
there are...
From who?
Well, I don't want to be specific. People's jobs and the livelihoods of their families are dependent on this. So, loose lips sink ships, You don't want to tell management everything.
Wow.
And besides, You have not shown, and I hesitate to criticize. As you know, I'm not about criticism, but you have not always shown yourself to be a friend of labor.
What? How dare
No,
you?
it's true. No, I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm just saying that on some certain level, you don't always put the interests of labor first when you're considering the needs of the company.
Yeah, because I'm not a communist.
You're not a communist. I've heard different.
What?
Yes.
From where?
Oh, there are memes floating around the internet that seem to show you as, kind of a Stalinist figure. I'm not saying who generated them. I don't know.
Well, if I recall correctly, there's someone else in that picture who's also portrayed as a communist.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I only know about you.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, we'll get to that later.
All right, fine. Be that way. I don't care. And the thing that I do find a little objectionable is that because it's Friday today in real time, I am sorry to say, and I have to say this, and I'm sorry to have to say it, it was mackerel in your commissary today. And the mackerel, what I've never understood is how that whitefish could make the pilgrimage every week. It's the same bloody fish, and it gets older and gamier, and then you keep passing it off as different fish. It's all lousy whitefish to begin with, and then you end up saying it's mackerel. It's not mackerel. It's half rotten. I mean, let's stop putting lipstick on the pig. The truth is that you hold on to that fish and you keep on dispensing it in the commissary instead of buying fresh fish every day. Now, what's with that?
Look, we've been over this before, okay? It's a source of stability, okay? In people's life, it's routine. They can count on it it's something they can
count on it, all right. Also, they can count it. They can count a stomach pump at the nurse's office.
It's important to manage people's expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, how, our world is immersed in technology and all this luxury, and people are miserable as ever. So the finer things don't correlate to happiness per se. Would you agree?
Well, I think it depends. Let me ask you a question. What can you tell me about the recent changes in the executive dining room? Not to keep banging around at the commissary. The executive dining room, I understand, has made some interesting changes to the offerings.
Yeah?
Yeah. Apparently, somebody was whining about the loss of a lobster and being forced to subsist off only steak alone. So they made some compensations for it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. What happened was to really go with the steak is we supplement a Louis XIII with that.
All right, so let me get this straight. So you have your steak, then you have your baked Alaska, then you've got Louis XIII cognac, and let me guess, Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee.
Yeah.
And this benefits, yeah, I'm sure it is neat. But how does this benefit the hardworking labor at the Tumbler House sweatshop?
The top floor executives are going to be more productive. They're going to generate more business.
They generate something.
And we've been over this time and time again. We have to retain the top talent, and we have to have these perks to attract and retain the top talent, Charles.
Well, speaking of perks, I want you to know that I do come bearing a protest from the secretarial pool. Speaking of perks, I refer to the antique percolators that they have to make coffee with down there. These are the same kinds of percolators that were used when I was a boy. And you've got espresso machines. And they've got these bloody percolators, I mean, they're fun to watch the coffee percolating, and I loved doing that when I was a child. But, I mean, this stuff is all circa 1964. Why can't they have decent espresso machines like you've got?
Look at.
Oh, never mind. I'm sorry I said anything.
There is a certain aesthetic, Charles.
There's an aesthetic, all right. Yeah, I know. The how to succeed in business without really trying Mad Men aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That should be you're right up your alley, to be honest. And here you are complaining. Talk
Well,
about ungrateful.
I'm only complaining on behalf of the girls themselves. I'll admit I do find it kind of nice. I find the beehives and the bouffants they wear kind of pleasant to look at.
Yeah.
And I do salute you for providing a beauty salon, because it's hard to find salons that can still do those particular hairdos anymore. But to see the chicks running around with these beehives and the big bouffants and everything, and they tell me that the hairdos are free. So that, all right, I don't know what the overhead is on running a hair salon, but you get. I will thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
It does provide a nice aesthetic, and I do feel like I'm sitting back in 1964 when I'm in the secretarial pool.
Good. That's a good
Even
thing,
our,
right?
yeah, that's a good thing. Even our Skype connection is better than you and I have, which is amazing that they have Skype at all, because it just doesn't fit in. They only have the one computer, and that's behind a curtain, so the girls take turns coming in to talk to me. But I could see the big hat, the big hair, and all that.
Yeah.
The pillbox hats on some of them. It's nice.
Yeah. Okay.
But we have memes and dreams, don't we?
We have some memes going on. We have a ton of memes. Oh, I'm so excited. All right, let's get on to the meme, shall we?
Yeah.
All right, meme number 1. From Dante. So, Mr. Bond, you made it to the penthouse suite for the last time. And you've got the eye patch on. What do you think of that?
Yes, I see.
You're a Bond villain.
It had to happen. But notice Bond has become a woman.
Oh, that's right.
And it's Miss Bond. So basically, I'm the latest Bond villain.
Ah, I see. Okay.
I get it. I'm a new Bond villain for a new Bond.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have been Goldfinger, or Dr. No, or Oddjob, or
Oh,
something
wow,
like
so you're
that.
a fan, huh?
Well, yeah. I mean, of the old Bonds, sure.
Of the old Bonds, yeah.
I'm not a big one for the revisionist Bonds,
Okay, meme number 2. In the same vein from Jolly
More of the
Jacobite.
same.
Miss Bond, did your Hanoverian masters really think that you could defeat me and my Jacobite comrades? Gosh.
Well, that's completely recasting the whole thing. I
Yeah.
mean, now Bond is on His Majesty's Secret Service, being the Jacobite king. Okay. And that is what this film of the Bond thing is called. Oh no, because Bond is on Her Majesty's Secret Service, being Hanoverian, Windsor.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all right, I'm the Jacobite villain. That's that's a recasting. All right.
All right, here's another one.
All right.
Jolly Jacobite again. Me respecting Southerners versus me when I remember that Southerners are mostly cringe Baptists.
Well, okay. All right, you got me there.
I love that how he's captured your face, and then you're thinking that. It's just, you're so troubled. You look so troubled by that thought.
Well, it is a hard one, I must admit. It is difficult. But I take comfort in the fact that in those days the Catholics that were in the South had a lot more influence and power over things than the ones in the North, even though there were a lot more of them in the North. So that's the one saving grace. But I do have to admit, going to the South today, basically, you go to the areas that are primarily inhabited by our co-religionists, and they're namby-pamby and weak.
Yeah.
You go to the areas of the country that stand for anything, and they're mostly non-Catholic, which does not put the believing Catholic in a happy frame of mind. Hence, I suppose, that look on my face. Which is it's a pretty good screen capture, if you ask me.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. All right, next one. From Nick. He said, when Charles is forced to answer my very poorly worded question from 4 months ago, and you've got this look. Oh,
Nick,
man.
Nick, let that be a lesson to you. Make sure your questions are well worded. Obviously, I wasn't happy at that point. Make me happy. Give me a well worded question that I can respond to in an intelligent manner.
Okay, I don't even remember the question, but I'm pretty sure the question was fine. All right, next one is a comment. We like disgruntled comments from angry people. Sometimes they're
Oh,
they're
indeed.
fun. So
They're the best.
here we go. Here's an over the top one. Now this is from our video. We did a video on imperialism and colonialism. It says, you guys are literally atheists. This is completely secular logic. Demonic.
Well, I'm sure you've got it's a deeply held opinion. I'm sorry you feel that way, I guess, or not. I don't know. Opinions are like moles. Everyone's got one. I don't know what to tell you. That's how you feel. That's how you feel. Some people feel the world is flat.
Such a strange segment for that to pop up on for colonialism and imperialism.
I don't know. I mean, obviously the person is very upset. I'm sorry you're upset. Just relax, learn an indigenous language, give up European clothes, culture, and so on. Stay away from European technology and medicine. Basically, sit in the mud and eat grubs.
That's what you said on that segment. So
well,
that's
I'll
more
say
the
it
same.
now.
You're gonna make that person even more mad.
Well, as long as he doesn't express it in the European language, who's to know? Just say Takanga Bambanka Kosako Hira Bongamba.
Oh, that is so. Okay, I'm not gonna even comment on that.
So what?
That's racist.
I see. So I'm not allowed to speak an indigenous language.
You weren't actually speaking an indigenous language, so you're mocking it.
You don't know that.
Okay,
See?
Okay, what language were you speaking?
See, you don't know. And no, I'm not. I am not going to put an indigenous people up before a microscope. For all you know, they have not yet made contact with white men, and revealing their language, the identity of their language on the air, would be tantamount to revealing their location, which would open them up to exploitation by outside interests. And I'm not going to do it.
Well, if they haven't had any contact with white men, how do you even know their language?
I can't tell you. That would reveal too much about them.
You're not.
Got you there.
Yeah, because you're not white per se. You're
Yes.
Because you speak French first, so that
Well,
means.
believe it or not, that's still white.
Is it still white? Okay.
I know it would upset the Irish in New England very much, to say nothing of the WASPs, but yes,
Okay.
French Canadians are still sort of kind of white.
Okay.
Non-Irish or non-New England Irish wouldn't mind,
Yeah.
but New England Irish might.
Yeah. What about the Yiddish?
Oh, they wouldn't care one way or the other.
Yeah.
They just shrug and say, "What? Well, what are you gonna do?"
Yeah. Okay, my favorite one. I've saved the best for last. Here we go.
Yeah.
I'm excited. From Jolly Jacobite again. Wow, off the menu really went off the rails.
See, I told you. I said you were a Stalinist and you'd been exposed.
What do you wear? You're in communist garb as well. You've got the hammer and sickle right where your button is.
Yeah, well, I'm a spokesman for the people. You're the plutocrat. You're the one living off the means of production. I'm just a hired gun. I'm a freelance writer. We don't count for anything anyway.
But this is clearly, I think this is in response to the distributist episode we did, where one of the things we countered was the notion that distributists are communists. We had a lot of talk about the means of production and taking it back for the people. Yeah.
Now, maybe they're misunderstood and they think it's the means of production.
Ooh.
See? And that
Wow.
could be what you're showing right now is a meme of production. You don't know.
It's true.
especially if it's in an indigenous language.
Yeah.
In which case, it shouldn't be appearing on a European computer screen anyway. Do you see how confusing this stuff is if you get your mind right?
It is. It is. But okay, so that'll do it for the memes and dreams. So some people have complained that our intros are too long, but we've taken a poll from the patrons, the big money men, and the big money men overwhelmingly said Charles is at his best when the intros are over 20 minutes long.
Heavens.
So, you've got on one side people who, are complaining the intros are too long, but they're not putting up any money. And then you've got people who are putting up tons of money who are saying long intros. So it's a tough,
It's not that tough.
It's not that
Ladies and gentlemen, you can buy my silence.
Wouldn't you like that?
Well, if you pay me to do less, pay me more to do less. Who wouldn't go for that?
That would be great.
I'm saying.
That would be great. Yeah.
Send in that. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're really tired of long intros, send in a lot of money and outbid all those terrible people who are paying for the long intros. You show them. You go ahead. You reach in deep into this thing here. You send in that dough and you show people who's boss. The marketplace, ladies and gentlemen. The free marketplace. The supply and demand. And if you want less, you pay for less.
There you go.
Doesn't make a lot of sense, but never mind. Why should it? We live in a world where little does. I will say, though, don't forget that you're in command here. If there's anything you don't like about the show, you don't actually have to watch it. You could fast forward. Because one thing you'll notice is that you've got these little descriptions of what's going on at what point in time.
Yeah. So
you can actually blaze right through the overly long introduction that people with money have paid for and go on just to the parts that you're getting for free. That's all you want. See? Easy peasy Japanesey.
Yeah.
And there's more. There's much more. You have it within your power, ladies and gentlemen, almost every one of you watching this, to do your own show that can be exactly the way you want it to be.
Well,
think about that.
This goes back to what I said on the pre-show. It's like, yeah, I could be interested in what I myself should do, or I could just tell other people what they should do and give them advice. I mean, the former is just such hard work.
Well, it's true. It's better to just tell people what to do and sit back rather than do it oneself. And actually, all kidding aside for just a second, ladies and gentlemen, the more voices there are out there saying the right things, the better it is. All right? So if you find that this or any other podcast is not up to your snuff, great. You produce something that is. And I'm not being funny. Because you know what? Differences, if any, aside, it could be you've got insights that no one else has. Really and truly. I mean, whether it's because of your geography or your background or the position in life you hold or whatever it might be, it's quite possible that you've got insights the rest of us could benefit from. And if there's any chance of that being true, then it seems to me you have an obligation to your fellow man, especially because anybody can do this now. I mean, if you've got an understanding of the technology, which I don't, fortunately you do. By all means, knock yourselves out, ladies and gentlemen. The more voices, the better. They can't get us all. They can't silence us all. So don't take it as a jibe. If you believe you can do better, or even if you believe you're capable of doing something different, useful but different but useful, please jump on in. It's a big ocean out here.
I agree. All you need is a web camera.
Yep. Easiest thing in the world. And then you could be sitting here. Now, there's a downside.
What's
the downside is, well, you might be sensitive to criticism.
Oh, yeah, that's a hard part.
That's the hard part. But, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah.
And after all, who of us is so perfect that he can't benefit from some criticism? Or as our German friends put it in German, an online lynch mob.
What? Why did you have to say that in German?
Online lynch mob.
Yeah, why did you use a German accent for that? Is that some
Well, it's a German phrase. I've never seen it in English.
in
In English, it would be an online lynch mob. But I've never seen anyone use that in English, whereas I've seen it several times in German.
But if it's in text, how? If it's in text, there's no accent though. If you've heard it on the internet.
Well, no, I've read it in German or Austrian papers in hard copy.
Oh, okay.
They
Well,
talk about people getting assaulted. This is all in German by an online lynch mob.
got it. Okay, interesting.
Uh-huh. I mean, I've never seen that in an English publication. A beautiful phrase.
Well, gosh, I wanted to talk about this a lot too. Actually, we're going into a tangent, but someone who left Twitter recently. I don't know if you know the Distributist, but he left
Yes.
Twitter and he said a lot of thought provoking things.
Yes, you said that to me. I did see it.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about that a lot, and it seems like that's almost one of the functions of social media, is it's whoever screams the loudest gets the action, gets
Yeah.
action from the corporations. It's like, oh, okay, we're all offended about this, so you need to shut this down, and
Well,
that's how it works.
this is true. This is true. I was amazed when I wrote a piece praising the House of Habsburg for the Catholic Herald.
Yeah.
Talk about an online lynch mob.
Mm.
But the funny thing about it was that, I mean, I had all these people screaming at me, and then Twitter itself said, "We noticed that you've got rather more activity than usual. Would you like us to limit it?" And I said, "Yes, I would," and they did.
That's interesting. I've never been blessed enough to get that. That must have been quite a lot.
Oh, it was really annoying, and of course, it was coming. I had all these twits coming at me. You call it twits, right? Coming at me during class time,
Yeah.
and my phone kept ringing, deet, 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 deet. But before my teachers could get aroused at me, annoyed at me, Twitter came to my rescue and shut the whole thing down. So thanks, Twitter. Shout out.
Okay.
I had no idea, though, how moronic people are on the topic of monarchy. And I know what you're thinking. Surely you've heard it all. I thought I had. But the foul, garbagey things that were said, amazing. Just amazing. I had no idea that the moronic population was so high. But why shouldn't it be?
All I want is for it to be a discussion and for people to think.
Oh, no. There can't be any thought. It's just me shrieking at you and saying, using foul language.
One of the things that I think is one of the worst things about Twitter is people confuse adjectives for arguments.
Yeah.
Just because you say something's despicable or a person's eccentric or something, that's not an actual argument. You just use an adjective.
Yeah, just calling a name, which I could do too. You're a moron. What have I proved?
Yeah.
If I call you a moron, what have I proved?
It's not significant. It's just noise.
It's just noise. Now, mind you, if I could show you that there's something wrong with what you said, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But, there's the old saying in debate, when you descend to the ad hominem, you've lost.
Yeah.
And it means you have no argument. And that is something I wish that not just Twitter, but on all social media, I wish people could get through their skulls. If you get to the point of calling names, you lost. Because obviously you don't have any way of defending your position, and you just hold it because you hold it. Well, you know what, pork chop? You have opinions, I have opinions. But if we can't back them up with anything, and all we can do is call names like pork chop or buttercup, as I do, then guess what? They're worthless.
My favorite quote is, I turned it into one of those internet picture quotes too from you. It is the hallmark of the modern mind that it dismisses with labels what it cannot overcome intellectually.
Yeah, I did say that, and it is true.
You know, oh, you're a bigot.
Yeah, I know. I'm a Higgit and a baiter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Baiter's gonna bait.
Don't say
Higgit's
that.
gonna hig.
Don't say that. Okay.
They are. Every Higgit goes out higgiting. They're all higging there. That's why they're Higgits. And the baiters are the same way. They bait. That's why there are all these fish getting caught.
Okay. All right, so let's get started. Let's get started with the questions. This is going to be a great episode. Your blood's up. I love this.
Oh, I'm ready for bear now, kids.
Okay. First question is from Jonathan.
Jonathan.
Why do people believe in republicanism, or worse, communism over monarchism, when the evidence is right in front of them, as is the case with Denmark, who is very stable and free, and is the oldest monarchy in Europe, and France, who is fairly stable and free, but has gone through 2 kingdoms, 2 empires, the Vichy state, and is currently on their 5th republic?
Well, firstly, it's a sign of the times that the question could be put in that form. I remember a time not so long ago when anyone asking that question would have reversed it. Who could possibly be in favor of monarchism?
I see.
Well, to answer your question, there are 2 reasons why people have a gut reaction against monarchy, as proved to me by the vast number of twits I got about the House of Habsburg. It is twits, right?
Sure. For you, Charles, sure.
All right. So what the twits saw were 2 things. One, they've been educated to despise monarchy and to believe in a false equality that doesn't really exist anywhere, let alone in their own lives. But they pretend it has. It had been propagandized from the time they were very small. If you want some fun along these lines, go see something put out by Schoolhouse Rock when I was a boy called No More Kings, all about how we overthrew evil King George, and we're going to have a president. He's going to do what the people want. Yeah.
That's so, and because everybody loves Schoolhouse Rock, and that perfectly embodies the programming that we undergo, and we don't question it.
No, there's no questioning. It just is what it is. And if you do question it, then you're wrong without any way of explaining. So that's the first thing, is pre-programming. And the second is what I like to call the politics of envy. I can never be a king.
Oh.
I could never be a nobleman.
Every man a king.
Yeah, but no one wears a crown. So said Huey Long. And I noticed he didn't divvy up the swag with everybody. Yeah, funny about that. No, although Mutatis Mutandis, I'd take Huey Long over FDR, but that's just me. Anyway, suffice it to say that, you know, we part of the propagandizing that allows our regime to continue is this idea of equality that simply is not true. It simply isn't real. The vast majority of us will always be ruled by a smallish minority. How do I know this? Who voted in abortion? Who voted in gay marriage? Who was consulted? Who was asked? And the truth of the matter is that this is true anywhere you look. Who voted in the new mass in the Catholic Church? Nobody. Nobody wanted it, except a few people at the top. Who brought in the new uniform for the 4th degree of the Knights of Columbus? Supreme. They didn't consult anybody. They pretended. They went through a form, but they knew what they wanted. They did what they wanted. This is what people in charge always do. So the question is never, oh, I want to have my rights, because you're never going to get them. The question is the nature of the people who rule you. Are they responsive to you? Do they give a damn? Where do they come from? What legitimizes them? What creates them? From whence comes their authority? From whence comes their legitimacy? Those are the questions that we should ask, but we don't, because we have this mythos of egalitarianism. So instead, because we've all swallowed it, we accept bossing around and kicking around, the like of which would have caused a peasant revolt in the Middle Ages. So, what can I tell you? Henry VIII could never have redefined either marriage or humanity the way our Supreme Court did. But we rolled over and accepted it. So, what's the boy to do? We basically, to answer your question, why? It's because we have been programmed to strain at gnats and to swallow camels. That's why.
What is that from?
The Bible.
Yeah. Okay. I knew it was someplace significant.
Yeah, I know. It's our Lord said it, but never mind.
That's an underrated book.
Yeah, it's a Protestant book. No Catholic should read it.
Okay.
Anyway, what else we got?
Okay. Next question is from Theo. Could you elaborate on the Franco and Salazar government's response to Vatican II? I understand Salazar was upset when Paul VI visited India and praised Hinduism just a few years after India had illegally seized Catholic Portuguese Goa.
Well, that's very true as far as Salazar goes, who was not happy about that. But, the Paul VI didn't really care tuppence for either Franco or Salazar. So, it didn't really matter. And of course, Paul VI outlived both of them. So I'm sure he was very happy about that. The problem with both Franco and Salazar is that their regimes were to some degree based on the notion that the church could be relied upon to be as it always had been. In other words, they would tend to temporal things while the church took care of religion. But all that changed during and after Vatican II, when basically the church, amongst other things, in Spain and Portugal, kind of underwent the same sort of collapse in dogma and liturgy and all that she did in the other countries, but also not only ceased to play the role that she had played of being an anchor of the regime, but began to actively work against the regime. You see?
Yeah.
And because a big part of the ethos of both Salazar's regime and Franco's was that they were Catholic regimes, if you've got the church working subtly or otherwise against you, you're on your way out. And there was also the fact that neither of them really made effective provision for the continuation of their regimes.
Yeah. Okay. Another question from Theo.
Yeah.
The historian Henry Sire called Catholic Bavaria and some of the other Catholic principalities of the Holy Roman Empire in the 18th century the last places where the natural development of a Catholic society could be observed. The exuberant Rococo, how do you say it?
Rococo.
Rococo. A style of ecclesial architecture was the expression of this culture. Could you give us your thoughts?
Well, first I've got to say that Rococo for many years has been kind of my guilty pleasure. You're not supposed to admit that you like Rococo because it's frivolous. It's frivolous. It's frothy. It's not serious. It's like whipped cream on top of coffee. Of course, I love whipped cream on top of coffee, and here in Austria, I'm able to drink as much of it as I want. So, but I must say I've always liked it, and I read Henry's book, and I have to agree with him. Certainly, the organic development of Rococo from Baroque, which in turn was oddly enough ultimately from Gothic. With the break in the Enlightenment and the Revolution, you have the onset of classicism, which does represent something of a break. Although the reaction to classicism was the neo-Gothic, which produced a lot of beautiful stuff in the 19th century. And there are even, I'll tell you, there are even some classical buildings I like. The truth of the matter is, much as I love Rococo, there are classical buildings I like, and there's certainly the neo-Gothic I'm very fond of. And for that matter, that turned into arts and crafts and Art Nouveau, and out of that we got Art Deco. After which we have the great brutalist and Bauhaus architecture, which destroyed it. You have this sort of natural progression with classicism as a kind of weird eruption. And then the whole thing after Art Deco turns into this unnatural and human stuff. But before that, I've never understood why it had to be one or the other. Why do you have to be purely Gothicist, purely Baroque, purely Rococo, purely Classicist? Why can't it be all of it? Why can't you? Horses for courses. One kind of architecture would be dull. Although it could be that I'm partly influenced by growing up in LA. Now that sounds strange, but the fact of the matter is that the older parts of Los Angeles were thrown up in a very, very short time, between about 1919 and 1939, about 20 years. And in that time, every imaginable style known to man was used. Remember that at the beginning of that time, LA was basically the city of Los Angeles, the downtown, and then a few other areas. From then until World War II, that all filled up. I'm not talking about the valley, that was post-war.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the area around LA and going to the sea. It was all filled up very, very rapidly. Hollywood, Torrance, Whittier, all that stuff. And they used literally every imaginable kind of architecture. And that kind of eclecticism is what I grew up around. So it could be that actually affected my view of these things. Precisely because it's so strange. If you come from overseas and you go around some of these areas, there's a French chateau right next to a real bit of Rococo.
Yeah.
Next to something Tudor. Next to Art Deco.
Well, who says you have to pick one? Who are these people you're referring to?
Purists. You'll always find purists. But honestly, I do have to agree, going back to the original question, I do have to agree that Rococo was certainly an expression of an unbroken chain of Catholic life up to that point. There's a beautiful church in Bavaria called the 14 Heiligen, the 14 Holy Helpers, which is a beautiful shrine. Look it up after you stop watching this, ladies and gentlemen. Look up the 14 Holy Helpers Shrine, 14 Heiligen. And you will be amazed by just how, it's almost, don't take this too far, but it's almost like a drug dream. It's so ornate. It's just incredible.
Okay.
Exuberant is the word for it.
Okay. All right. Next question is from Edgardo.
Okay. What do you got, Edgardo?
Is there a transcendent spiritual reason to dress formally every day? How can Catholic men benefit not dressing like the world tells us to do so, thinking primarily about trends or comfort?
Well, that's a good question. And I have to admit that for many years, I've put on a jacket and tie every day. So I am perhaps the one to ask.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of reasons. One is that, if nothing else, it is somewhat ascetical because there's a minimal amount of discomfort involved. Minimal because the longer you do it, the less you feel it. And, in the pre-show, I was asked about seersucker. And sure enough, during the hot season, there are things like seersucker and linen you can wear that'll mitigate the annoyance somewhat while maintaining the appearance. It also has to do with self-respect and also respect to the people around you and the general tone of the place. To give you an example, many's the time when I get on an airplane, I've been thanked by the stewardesses for how I dress.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Why?
And I fly a lot.
Yeah.
Because it makes them feel better. It makes them feel like what they're doing is worth something. And again, when I was a kid, and this is where a lot of my ideas of this sort of stuff were formed. when I was a kid, if people traveled, they put on a jacket and tie, or if they were women, they something good looking. Although I'm a much better expert on male dress than women's for some reason. Never having worn a dress, which I'm grateful. But I'm sure everyone else is too. But the the thing is that it elevates any situation. Of course, contrary-wise, I can remember one flight I got on a few years ago, back when and this will tell you exactly what had happened. The television program Pan Am was on the air about these hot young stewardesses in the 60s. Well, I got on a flight, and the stewardesses were all rather elderly. Sweet ladies, very grandmotherly, very attentive, very good at what they did, but they were all at least my age, if not older. So the fellow next to me, as I sat down, he looks at me, he looks at the stewardess as she walked by, and he says, these sure aren't the chicks from Pan Am. And I said, oh, you're wrong, sir. They are the chicks from Pan Am. And he said, oh, and I said, yes, this is what the years will do to you. And I was one of the little kids on Pan Am. Not so little anymore. But at any rate, sorry, I couldn't help that, ladies and gentlemen. But it is true. You elevate any situation if you dress well. My late father used to say that civilization began to die when waiters and bartenders were better dressed than their patrons. And I think that's a fair comment.
I really like this one because so much of, I think, what you stand for, Charles, is dismissed as, LARPing or, some fantasy world or some eccentric thing. But to me, there's really no excuse to not dress formally or dress well. There's only good reasons.
No. There are. I mean, you could worry about expense a little bit, but there's some really fine secondhand stores. And I know because I've used them. You can worry about what people might think. But what you'll find is that people, if they express an opinion, are generally happy to see you well-dressed. And, the same I have to say is true of wearing a hat. I wear a fedora when it's cool and a boater when it's not. And I've often had people come up and thank me for it. That's not why I do it, but it's interesting that they do. And so I feel I don't really know what to say. It's like when a stewardess says, thank you so much for dressing. I feel like saying, well, what was I going to cover my underwear? But that would not be appropriate. So I just say, oh, well, thanks. Although every now and then someone will ask rather aggressively, why are you wearing a hat? And if the question is posed that way, I say, I line it with tinfoil. That way the aliens can't take my thoughts. And they never ask another question ever again.
Wow.
Or if somebody goes rude, it's perfectly acceptable to go nuts.
I like that. That's awesome.
Then they're yours to play with. When they're rude, they're yours to play with any way you want to. So if you want to say that, it's on a par, and I know I've told this to you before, but when people say to me, oh, you went to college in Roswell, New Mexico. What about the UFO that crashed? Well, my inevitable answer is, I hate that. People are always asking me about the one that crashed. They never ask about the one that completed its mission.
Yeah, that person wasn't rude per se.
No, but it's still an odd question. What do I know about the UFO that crashed?
I think you're just trying to come up with excuses to mess with people. I think you just inherently like messing with people.
Well, no, that's not nice.
It's not nice, but it's true.
Well, that's beside the point. It's not nice. I do like messing with people. but you got to bear in mind, I come from a family that does this.
Oh,
We
then
all
it's
do.
okay.
You,
Then it's
well, it
okay.
is okay. Anything Columbus do is okay. You know that. At least we've been telling ourselves that for about 4 centuries. No, I asked my father once why we're like this, why we enjoy messing with people, and we all do. There's no doubt about it. And he said something that I thought was insightful. It's because, he said, we have lived for centuries in a society that hates our stinking guts. Well, what can you do but give back to it what it's given you? It's kind of like Salvador Dali and surrealism. You know, he was a Catholic, a monarchist, and a nobleman in a society that spat on all three. So he gave them melted clocks and charged them for them.
Oh man, you what was that video you showed me of Dali on that game show?
Oh yes, to tell
I
the
highly
truth.
recommend that for everybody.
That's true.
What was the name?
It was, I believe, it was To Tell the Truth. It was To Tell the Truth. No, it was What's My Line.
What's My Line? Yeah, because they had to guess who he was.
You're right.
And when you play this game with a surrealist, it's
it's a little difficult.
It's a little difficult. Some complications.
Little difficult. And I've always found surrealism to be a tremendous comfort in the face of adversity. My friend Bonnie Callahan, whom we remember, she of Tumblr House covers fame. I remember she has a button that says, "You remember the phrase from Lord of the Rings? Go not to the elves for counsel, for they shall say both yes and no."
Mm-hmm.
So she had a button that said, "Go not to the surrealists for counsel, for they shall say both blue and hippopotamus."
Yeah.
Remember that, ladies and gentlemen, when the world around you gets too crazy for words, just remember, go not to the surrealists for counsel, for they shall say both blue and hippopotamus.
Well, and when the going gets weird, the weird
turn pro.
Yeah.
You bet. Well, that explains a lot about Tumblr House.
It does.
and these podcasts. Okay, what are the questions we got?
Right. Charles, as a new Catholic, I'm hoping you can help me with my murky understanding of particular devotions. For instance, when I hear someone say, "Pray to Our Lady of Fatima, Our Lady Undoer of Knots, the Immaculate Heart of Mary, Sacred Heart of Jesus," etc. Sounds like I'm being asked to pray for a specific event in history or a certain aspect of the one who I am praying to. I recognize that Mary indeed has different titles, but I don't quite understand what the purpose of using the titles is, as if somehow I am praying to a different Mary under a different title. Even though I have already participated in some of these devotions, I would love a fuller understanding of them. Thank you and Vincent both for the great video content. They have been crucial to my conversion to Catholicism. God bless.
Well, firstly, thank you very much for that. It's always good to hear that we're doing something good. So thanks a lot. And, with any luck, we can continue to help you to whatever degree we help anyone. To answer your question, you've got to bear in mind that these things do not come from us. They come from heaven. Our Lord and Our Lady have chosen the ways in which they will manifest themselves and what they'll encourage and what they'll do. So you're quite right in realizing that the different devotions to Our Lady, the different devotions to our Lord are not devotions to different Our Ladies and different Our Lords. They're all the same. But why do they emphasize different things? Well, in the case of our Lord, you've got to bear in mind that his is an immensity that we can't wrap our minds around. We talk about the hypostatic union, and he's true God and true man. And he has he's the second person of the Holy Trinity, hypostatically united to his manhood, his body and soul, humanity and divinity. We rattle these things off, but the truth of the matter is we can't comprehend them.
Yeah.
So what does he do? He gives us, shall we say, facets that allow us to understand the whole a bit better to one particular area. because ultimately there's too much in him to contemplate. You know, he's truly and actually present in the bread and the wine, which is no longer bread and wine, not a particle of it. It's all him. These, and the other thing you'll find is that as a result, the devotions to him fold into each other, backwards and forwards. From the Sacred Heart, we get the precious blood. But obviously that connects directly to the Eucharist. The Divine Mercy comes out of the Sacred Heart as well, but goes into the Eucharist and baptism. The 5 wounds flow into the Sacred Heart. The holy name of Jesus is connected. The kingship of Christ. They're all interconnected. And of course, every imaginable Eucharistic devotion. That's why you could talk about the Eucharistic heart of Jesus, our Eucharistic King. You know, they all flow back and forth, but they're different aspects of the one reality that are easier for one personality to grasp this way and another this way.
Yeah.
Or this way and this way.
Yeah, one aspect's hard enough.
Right. And then, but they allow you, once you get into one of them, to understand the rest a bit better. It's like the old joke, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah.
How do you understand the amazing, incredible reality that is Christ? One element at a time. And when you look at the Sacred Heart, that's sort of at a central location, literally, but also figuratively, because the Sacred Heart is connected to everything else. It's interesting that in the Eucharistic miracles that have occurred, when some or all of a host is turned to flesh, it's always been heart flesh. Which, I mean, there's a message for us there. Now, as regards Our Lady, it's a bit different. Again, she's chosen to appear in different places with her son's permission at her son's command. And again, the relationship between the two of them is something we can never understand, really. The Immaculate Heart and the Sacred Heart were intimately united all the time that she carried him, those 9 months. So, I mean, again, I can say that, and you can intellectually grasp it, but the totality of what it means is very, very tough. So, once again, we're given dribs and drabs, and Our Lady appears in different places in response to different historical occurrences. And the best way I can liken this for you is take a mother who's got 2 very different children. One of them is a very lazy, sleepyhead. The other's a workaholic. Well, to the one, she says, you better slow down. You're going to kill yourself, son. Relax. You know, sleep in at least once a week. Just stop and smell the roses. But the other one, she's, get up and move. What are you're sleeping half your life away. Get going. Come on. Well, is she contradicting herself? No. She has 2 very different sons to address. So similarly, Our Lady, being the mother of all mankind, and particularly of the members of the Church, at different times, at different places, she has different messages, and in turn, different people respond more or less to each of them. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. This reminds me of a kind of a related question, which is how she appears differently in apparitions, even.
Yeah. And again, it's coded very much toward her audience, toward her people, because she appears in whatever way will make them most comfortable, as a mother would. So when she appeared at La Salette, she was wearing Alpine garb. When she appeared in Guadalupe, she was dressed like an Aztec princess. When she appeared at Pontmain in France, she appeared in this beautiful blue robe speckled with red stars. I mean, it's just a very lovely thing. And so it went.
Okay. Next question is from Patty. What are some good ways to encourage reverent liturgy as a freshman in college? I'd like to try and introduce others to the extraordinary form of the Mass and the accompanying devotional life, but this might make me run afoul of the powers that be. Do you have any advice?
Well, yeah, I do. a lot depends on the powers that be, and a lot depends upon what's available to you. So there are a couple of things I would do. Firstly, uh, survey your friends, see who's interested. Suss out your Catholic chaplaincy and find out what the priest is all about, what his story is. Obviously, the older he is, the less interested he's going to be in tradition, usually. I would suggest you and a few of your cohorts take him out for a drink or two and kind of find out what he's all about. I would also look and see what kind of traditional stuff is available in the area. It may even be that if you've got a fraternity parish or something like that, the priest there might be able to intervene on your behalf with your chaplain. I mean, so much depends upon your particular situation. As far as running afoul of the powers that be, a lot depends on presentation. Sometimes you're not going to have a choice. Sometimes if you ask for adoration, they'll walk all over you and call you names and so on. In which case, all you can do is say, get stuffed. I mean, when I was at Cal State Northridge, our Newman Club was basically just a recruiting ground to the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, i.e. communists, and Dignity, i.e. gays. And if you weren't a gay communist or a communist gay,
okay,
there really, there really wasn't much place for you there. At least not in the Catholic chaplaincy. I'm sure things are not quite that. Remember, it's another time as well as another place, so let's hope things have improved. But this is stuff you have to take into account. But take a survey of where you are and what the tools that you've got to work with are. It may be that you can work with your chaplain. It may be you can't. Maybe you have to go off campus. Maybe there's no place to go off campus. I don't know. You got to do the survey.
Okay, I have a 2 cents. My 2 cents to put in on this matter, because there's been a lot on my mind on how to promote the Latin Mass. One of the ways I'm promoting is through the Knights of Columbus. People attack Knights of Columbus as, it's this Novus Ordo thing, and it is. But evangelization, what is that? That's too dying. Wait, what is that? That's not American currency. I don't care about that.
This one is.
Your Austrian currency. Okay.
Anyway, these are your 2 cents. Go ahead.
Go. Okay. No, but Knights of Columbus, I'm trying to get people to go to Latin Mass, and it's a very kind of a passive thing. You let people know. I didn't even say I go to Latin Mass. I say I go to the 1 o'clock Mass, but people know what the Mass that is, and I think the process is very simple because it's very human factors. It's not an intellectual argument that I think is important that really converts. It's about creating a familiarity and giving people a sense of belonging, that they know people there, it's all these human factors. It's not some grand philosophical process to get to the Latin Mass. It's very human. It's very low level. And so I've successfully been able to get some people to try out the Latin Mass. And I think this is the process. I know Vinny. He is a warm human being. He's a man of integrity. He goes to the Latin Mass. I know someone who goes to the Latin Mass now. I am now that much more likely to go to the Latin Mass. I think it's that simple.
Well, and I mean, don't forget too that a lot of people have been propagandized against it and against the people who go, and some people have had unfortunate experiences at Latin Masses.
Yeah,
because some of our trad brethren are not always the most welcoming.
Right.
Especially in certain places, woe betide the Novus Ordo check that doesn't come in a veil.
Right.
There are ways and there are ways you can get points across. And I mean, I hate to quote St. Francis de Sales because he was a saint, but you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Yeah. And just another anecdote, I took a friend to the Latin Mass. They were, kind of getting into it. They're very new to Latin Mass. And everyone was so darn welcoming and so friendly and warmth afterwards. And I thought to myself, this is a million times more persuasive than any sort of intellectual argument on the internet or anything. This feeling of welcoming and you belong, and
And welcome home,
and welcome
because that's
home.
what it is.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're a Catholic, this is your right, it's your heritage that's been taken from you.
that's right.
And so when someone finds their way to the traditional Mass, instead of being greeted with suspicion and scorn as a Novus Ordo bumpkin,
Yeah,
in the memorable phrase of one person I knew, they should instead be welcomed as someone who's finally found their way to their own home.
yeah.
And that, I mean, it would seem obvious, but
So yeah, so I guess my final note is, everyone who's Knox Knights of Columbus, to me, I see this as an opportunity. I see this as prime territory. Don't be so pure that you can't reform. Like, oh,
you know,
I can't taint myself with this. Oh man,
the thing
are you?
you have to bear,
Yeah. What?
you have to bear in mind too about the Knights is that although Supreme can pull some very strange and boneheaded things, and you know what I'm talking about,
You, of course.
uh,
Yeah,
the councils,
people knock the Knights for the leadership standing up. Okay, yeah, I agree, but that doesn't
but
mean
the
you can't
local
use it as a vehicle.
no, and the local councils, depending on the local council, do a lot of good. I mean, I'll admit that as a fourth degree Knight, I'm really annoyed about the whole uniform thing.
Yeah,
But having said that, that does not detract from the good that the councils do at the parish level. You know, the whole fourth degree thing only affects a small minority of Knights anyway.
yeah,
It's a visible minority, and the whole looking like the Canadian Royal Canadian Legion thing is a little much, but um, it doesn't detract from the fact that the order does a lot of good, and in a lot of parishes, it's one of the major sources for the good works that the parish itself does. Why would you not want to be part of that?
yeah. And again, don't be so pure and so immaculate that you can't reform, lest you be tainted. Saint John of the Cross, when he joined the Carmelites, they locked him up in prison. So Carmelites wasn't exactly in a good way. It was probably worse off than the Jesuits in a sense, or
Well,
something like that. I mean, if they're actually going to put him in prison,
we remember the Redemptorists dragged their founder, St. Alphonsus Liguori, through the streets of Rome, I think, or Naples, one or the other. So sometimes, organizations you get kind of screwy, but it doesn't change the intent of the organization.
yeah, we have to have that hope that we can do something. And on a council level, absolutely, you can get one or two people to the Latin Mass. You can, and then once you have more people going to the Latin Mass, then suddenly you have a little group there. And
No,
suddenly that your council is that much more friendly to the Latin Mass, and it snowballs from there. You have to have hope in
yeah,
these things.
absolutely. Oh, wait a minute. This takes us back to actually doing something myself.
Oh yeah. You know what? And for Scratchel, I said, don't try to do anything. Just complain and tell Supreme what they need to do. Supreme, you need to stop being wishy washy. You need to do it. Okay, now let me go back to other social media posts.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go back and twit now.
Yeah. Okay.
Although I have to, my biggest problem with Supreme is that during being touring around there, I never, ever, ever once saw what I was looking for.
What were you looking for?
Diana Ross.
Ha 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 ha. Yeah, Diana Ross and the Supremes. Got it.
That's what I was looking for.
All right.
I found Supreme, but where was Diana Ross? Exactly. The same thing happened to me in Washington at the court building. I looked for her there.
Wow.
Do you know when she's Chief Justice, you know what her first injunction is going to be?
I'm scared to ask. What?
Stop in the name of love.
Wow. Okay.
That'll be her first injunction as Chief Justice of the United States.
That's pretty cringe, Charles. Not gonna lie.
All right. Well, fine.
Next question from Patty. I know this is a personal fault of mine.
Patty, do we really want to go here?
I am quite poor at and sometimes embarrassed by praying in front of others. If asked to lead in prayer, I will oftentimes choke up and blurt out some hurried cliche. Since I'll now be living with a roommate, what are some good ways to overcome this fear?
Well, as with any phobia, the best way to try to overcome it is to defy it. So what you might consider doing is saying grace in restaurants, and especially when you're eating alone. That kind of thing. You might talk to your roommate and say, you want to pray, but you're embarrassed to do so in front of other people. Would it be a problem for her? Don't be afraid to guilt her.
Yeah.
Feel free to guilt your roommate. The whole Yiddish mama thing. No, it's all right. I'll just sit here in the dock. Don't you worry, darling. You go right ahead. Don't be afraid to guilt her. And the more you do it, the more you pray in public, the easier it'll become. So if you're given that task for whatever reason, don't shy away from it. Do your best. Choke through it. Say the cliches, if that's all you can think of. But the more you do it, the easier it will get. And that's my advice. It's like overcoming any phobia.
Yeah. Well, I have had huge experience with fear and anxiety. So I'm the go-to guy for this one. And I have to say, to master fear, you must become fear. You must bask in the fear of others. And men fear most what they do not see.
So she should wear a bag over her head?
No, I am the Batman. No, actually, that's
that's all helpful. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for playing, ladies and gentlemen. You lose. You do not gain $5,000. You do not win the trip to Brazil. Thank you very much for playing, indeed. No, I'm sure you had some real advice to offer, but I don't think that was it.
No, that was a movie quote. That was Ra's al Ghul from Batman Begins. But no, yeah, it sounds like it's confidence issues in general and not being comfortable in your own skin. But as Charles, right, again, I went to actually a therapist for social anxiety. And as Charles rightly said, the way you overcome it is exposures. I would always get homework, and it's about some social event where you just interact with people, and and just reporting your experience, and slowly but surely you are more comfortable. You become more comfortable and confident, and you discover that the world isn't going to end in a certain social encounter, that you aren't going to just simply crumble to pieces as much, despite what you might think. But I think one important thing, there's a religious component to this, which is lack of confidence is kind of like lack of confidence in God. Like God is going to take care of you. That's very important. And so pray for confidence. Pray for confidence in God. And I think you will get confidence. Go to adoration. Well, I know you go to adoration, Patty. I know that. Yeah. So, but do that more. And when you feel anxious, go to the Blessed Sacrament. That's what I do, actually. I go to the Blessed Sacrament whenever, you've got stormy waters going on. And you're very fearful about things. And what does Professor Biersack say? Place one drop of the heart of blood on thy tongue, and fear no evil, something like that.
One on thy heart and fear no evil.
Yeah, on thy heart and fear no evil. Yes, there you go. So, Litany of Humility. Again, huge recommendation. Litany of Humility, because that's what you're praying for. You're praying because humility is about not being fearful and not asking for things from this world, not asking for, not needing understanding from people, or, not being afraid of contempt even. That's all right there packed into the Litany of Humility. That's one of the most powerful prayers, I think, in order to be happy, too. It's so basic, the Litany of Humility. I mean, man, I can't stress that prayer enough. So, no, that's my 2 cents. Any closing things, Charles? Any closing things?
No, I agree. I mean, the only other thing I can add is what my father said to me when I came home from a party when I was 14. And he asked me, "Are you nervous meeting new people and going to a crowded room filled with folks you've never met before?" And I said, yeah, I am actually. And he said, "Well, that's exactly how everyone else feels, so you don't have to. Let them do the worrying for you."
I will say, again, I've said this before, it's very important. I think there's so much more anxiety nowadays because we have so many things. We're used to everything being on our terms, everything being comfortable, everything being pleasure-inducing. So then when we have a situation where we don't have full control and, we're not extracting pleasure of it and something's expected from us, we're not confident anymore. Because we're so coddled in a sense with music through our earphones, machines to condition the air, fast food, TV on demand, noise on demand.
And also you have people who have grown up now who have never had a lot of, shall we say, involuntary interaction with other people.
Yeah.
Or to put this another way, when I was a kid, we had gangs in the neighborhood, and I don't mean gangs like 18th Street. I mean bunches of kids that hung out together. Now, why were we together? Because of geography. What do we have in common? Some things maybe more with this one, less with that one. Some people we particularly didn't like. There were bullies. It was the whole gamut of things. But you had to deal with kids. And you lived in a different world from the adults. There was a pecking order. There was a whole other world, and you had to somehow navigate through it, knowing that you were pretty much on your own. Now, that if things got wild or out of hand, you could talk to your parents and intervene, but that was the nuclear option. The point was you did not want to involve adults in this other world you lived in.
Yeah.
And that's gone. The whole forging your identity against a bunch of other kids who are doing the same thing, that's gone. Even in school, the whole schoolyard thing is gone. I mean, what they're talking now about bullying, for instance. Bullying was a fact of life, and you had to deal with it. And I certainly had to. You learned that if you were bullied and you let it occur, then you'd never know any peace.
Yeah. Another way to frame it, I think, in terms of why everyone's so anxiety-ridden is people, especially particularly young men, don't have as many opportunities to discover the strength within themselves. Because everything's so coddled. If things were more difficult, they would be able to see that they are strong and that they can handle this and that they don't fall to pieces.
Well, and there's been a real failure of fatherhood.
Well, that too.
I mean, my dad was the model for me. He still is. And very often I try, when something comes up, I try to think, what would Dad have done? Um, and sometimes that's useful, sometimes it isn't. But the point is that if you come from a broken home, or you come from a home where the father is, shall we say, passive, it's just not the same thing. And unfortunately, we have a huge plethora of those setups today. So, it's funny. The band Green Day.
Yes, I know the band Green Day.
Well, they did a song called Jesus of Suburbia.
Ugh.
Now, I have to say that I found this song almost incomprehensible. But one line jumped out at me. All the moms and Brads. I knew exactly what that meant. I knew the Brads were the mommy's boyfriend figures. They're not fathers. And very often they come and go. They're the male-esque figure that's occupying the master bedroom with mom for the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. The moms and Brads. I knew that immediately. And it is a crime that so many kids have been subjected to such a, for want of a better word, upbringing.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can only tell you that if you get married or you are married, remember that your children are more important than you are. They're more important than your happiness. They're more important than if you feel fulfilled. They're more important than if you fulfilled your bucket list or lived up to your dreams, or if you suddenly realize you're no longer in love with this person next to you. You know what? Tough. It's not the fault of the kids. Now, I mean, obviously there are times when, I don't know, the husband's a monster or the woman's a shrew and this, yeah. But by and large, most often, they're not life-threatening, they're just annoying. But see, you chose to marry that person. Your children did not choose to be born. There's a difference. And you and your spouse have an advantage that your children lack. You're the, for want of a better word, adults. Adults. Now, if you find yourself in the situation of not being a father or a mother, if you find instead that you're an uncle or an aunt or a godfather or a godmother, and you're the innocent bystander to a horrific situation, or a grandmother or grandfather, do the best you can. And sometimes that's not much. Sometimes you can't. But to the degree that you can make a difference in a kid's life. And that's so very, very important. And, the nature of things, you're living here, your daughter and her current Brad are living with her 6 kids in Kansas City. Well, all right, there's only so much you can do. It's true. But whatever you can do it. Even using the new technology. It's if nothing else, if the kid sees his relation once every week on Skype, well, it's better than nothing. It's not great. It's suboptimal, as they like to say, but it's a darn sight better than zip.
Okay. Right.
What else we got?
Are we as Catholics allowed to believe in bad omens in our everyday life? If so, what are some we should be looking out for, and which are superstitions? Does Charles know any way that these have been historically warded off? Like what?
Well,
what's an omen? I mean, is it really
an
that?
omen is a sign. An omen is a presaging of ill fortune.
But like, is it like a preternatural sign? I mean, is it really?
I
I mean,
suppose.
that
I
seems what's
mean,
baked into this question.
if a vampire comes in front of you and pushes your throat back so it can bite you, my advice is that this is definitely disoptimal.
That's okay. Yeah,
Definitely disoptimal.
yeah.
Not a good thing. No, I mean, the church is against anything that denies free will. So, in other words,
Well, that,
if you're one of these folk that look to astrology to plot the future course, or the tarot, or anything else as the 100% inescapable future which you're going to have to go through, that's wrong
well,
because it limits.
isn't that what
Hmm?
prophecy is? The Antichrist, etc.
Yeah, but you'll notice those are all conditional upon people's behavior. If people, there's always the escape clause. If people behave themselves, pray and do penance and so forth, then they'll make things better. Always the escape clause.
Okay, well that's nice.
What you need to do if you're worried about supernatural, or more importantly, in this case, preternatural evil, wear your sacramentals. Your St. Benedict's medal, your scapulars, your miraculous medals, all that stuff. Bearing in mind that these things are very powerful against preternatural evil. Use your holy water. But beyond that, pray for the Holy Ghost to guide you through whatever nonsensical messes life will bring you through. As Cardinal Newman, soon to be canonized, put it, lead kindly light amidst the encircling gloom. Don't worry too much about omens. It's a natural human response, but don't. Just do your duty, say your prayers, wear your sacramentals, trust in God.
Okay, simple enough. Okay, I always
No.
I always feel like racism in Catholic cultures is different than the type in Protestant cultures. Protestant people's racism seems far more hateful than just normal racism. Why is this? How does racism in Catholic countries differ from racism in Protestant countries?
Well, firstly, you've got to define your terms. What does racism mean? Does it mean preferring one's race to other people's? Well, I mean, presumably one prefers one's own nationality and ethnicity and culture to that of other people. But if you love your own, does that mean you have to hate others? That's another issue. To answer the question, in Catholic countries, racism, so-called, in the sense of a rabid dislike of non-whites, was much more ameliorated, partly by the fact that in the early settlement of French, Spanish, and Portuguese colonies, the church actually encouraged intermarriage. And then, of course, we have saints like St. Martin de Porres who were products of it. And in all those countries, you very rapidly had a class of mixed bloods arise who were a big part, an important part of the population. So it was very much a different thing. I mean, just to take one small example, in French and Spanish Louisiana, the French law, the Code Noir, the Black Code that determined how you dealt with your slaves, not only required you to baptize your slaves, but if you fathered a child on a slave woman, you not only had to give her her freedom and that of your children, you had to provide for them as though they were legitimate, which led to the growth of the free people of color in Louisiana, who very often had educations in France and owned plantations and slaves of their own. So that was on the one hand. On the other hand, in the English-speaking colonies and in the States, people very often sold their own children for higher prices because a slave that looked, the more white a slave in those areas looked, the higher the price. And this was interesting to me because a few years ago I was in Connecticut at the Harriet Beecher Stowe House in Hartford. They passed around a picture of a group of slave children at the time of emancipation, and most of them looked like white kids. So, it certainly was a very, very different thing. I mean, uh, Catholicism did not and has never provided perfect amity between the races, but it certainly was a lot easier in Catholic countries than in Protestant countries.
Okay. What do you think about the findings of the study on same-sex? Oh, by the way, Joe asked this question. Excuse me.
Hello, Joe.
What do you think
What
about...
do you know?
Hello, Joe. What do you know? Yeah. What do you think? What do you think about the findings of the study on same-sex behavior released Thursday of last week in the Journal of Science? Warning, it has enraged every feminist and secular humanist that has a pen and paper, and internet coverage of this is a wasteland of crap. Its findings are interesting.
Wow.
There were scant few genetic correlates. The strongest genetic correlates were statistically insignificant, less than 1%, but previously associated with the later development of mental illnesses and environmentals, accounting for 99%. In other words, nurture, not nature.
Well, it's hardly a shock. I mean, up until 20 or 30 years ago, nobody had any question about this sort of thing. Then came the whole discussion about the so-called gay gene. And frankly, were I in that category, I would breathe a sigh of relief with this report.
Yeah.
There was a very interesting play which became a movie called The Twilight of the Golds, about a family in the near future when the gay gene has been discovered. And the daughter of the family, she and her husband, her brother is gay. She and her husband have a baby who's not born yet. And killing children with birth defects before birth has become very common. I am sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that if that were the case, if such a thing existed, there would be abortions over it. And I, for one, am very happy that such is not the case. Now, having said that, you look at the wide range of weird sexual behavior that human beings indulge in, the weird temptations that we have. I have known people who have been very particularly attracted to married people. Yes, I know, it seems strange. There are people who are particularly attracted to priests or nuns. There are people who are particularly attracted to the underage. And I'm not going to even touch animals and things like that. So, where do these things come from? They come from nurture, not nature. We get bent for all sorts of reasons, usually having to do with the course of our early life, into one or another, shall we say, suboptimal direction. And gaiety is no different than the rest of them. One of the great disservices, I think, that have been done to the population, both with and without that particular position, has been the creation of quasi-ethnic group status on the basis of behavior. This is a terrible thing because, number one, it isolates them and pulls that particular sin out of all relationship to the vast tapestry of human sin. In the immediate, it may give them certain privileges, but ultimately it makes them a group that can as easily be persecuted as privileged. And that, I don't think, would be a good thing.
It's true.
Although I do have to say that years ago I was asked to write about gays in the military when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was being introduced. This is back in the 90s under President Clinton. And after writing a serious evaluation of the issue, I said, but as long as we are going to erect quasi-ethnic group status on the basis of behavior, I want to speak for my people, the Alco-Americans. We are the only minority group whose very existence was made a crime by an amendment of the Constitution. And even though that amendment was repealed, even today, we could lose our homes and our families and our jobs just for being who we are. If we're driving along in our native state, we can lose our licenses. We can be arrested. We can be thrown in jail. And God help you if you allow a minor to decide for himself whether or not he's one of the tribe. It's horrible. But one day we will have freedom. After the million drunks stagger on Washington, one day we'll be able to legally handle heavy equipment and high explosives. And alcohol awareness programs in schools will allow children to decide for themselves whether and how much they want to drink and what they want to drink. You'll see.
Yeah, that's a very potent point you make. I can tell it's your go-to because 2 episodes ago you said the exact same thing, and it was so good I was gonna promote it on its own because I think it's a very good point.
Until we have freedom in this country.
Yeah.
Freedom for everyone or freedom for none. That's how it is.
Yeah.
Bigots and haters want to restrict our access to that very thing that makes us who we are.
Yeah. Until you guys can drive and operate dangerous machinery.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something, and don't forget us tobacco Americans. We're really in a bad way. You talk about getting chased from pillar to post. Why can't we be who we are?
You can, but you just have to pay.
A lot, and that's not all. We can't sit in restaurants like normal people. It's segregation, just like in the South.
Now, secondhand, you're killing other people.
Oh yeah, next you'll say that AIDS kills. What's wrong with you?
Okay.
Obviously, you're listening, and you're going to attack cirrhosis next.
Okay.
So basically, you're blaming the victim. No, I get it. That's fine. See, that's exactly how the Ku Klux Klan worked.
Okay.
Freedom for all on the basis of behavior.
Absolutely. Well, see, that's you said it's a good thing. This is good for homosexuals. I think it's good too because if there was actually a gay gene, then that removes the choice, and it's like, sorry, buddy, you got no choice. Whereas the whole gender thing is all about choice. It's not about being locked into something absolute or something biological. It's about doing whatever the hell you want.
Which sadly, unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
I'm afraid not.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, we are locked into certain roles by virtue of the nature of our bodies. And you've heard me go on about this before, why I don't believe in transgender. But the reason is that if you are a woman, a certain portion of the month has a huge effect on you. Childbirth will always be a big question for you, to do it, to not to do it, having done it, having never done it, etc. And rape will always be a question, a fear, in a way that it's not for men, unless they're in prison or on shipboard. But by and large, you will be affected by these things in ways that no man can ever be and can ever dream of what it's like having them. Contrary-wise, you can't imagine what it's like not having them. It's simply not being even an issue.
Yeah.
So, if you're a guy and you want to wear a dress and chase other guys, you're still never going to know what it is to be a woman because you don't have those 3 things. And if you're a lady and you want to wear a buzz cut and, a T-shirt with the cigarette up under the cigarette pack up under the sleeve and all this, drive a truck and so forth, great. but you're still never going to know what it's like not to have those three things.
Yeah.
You can't, and we can't. So, you know, it's very important that people learn to accept themselves for who and what they are. It really is. And, you know, if you do have if you are, remember that we're all of us given sinful predilections. The only difference is which they are. Kind of like a ruling class.
Yeah.
The difference is what the type is. But we're all sinners. You won't find anyone who isn't tempted to something wrong. That's the whole point of temptation. But notice something else. Other people's temptations are incomprehensible. Our own, of course, make
Mine are
perfect sense.
reasonable. Yeah.
Well, yes, exactly. They're natural.
Yeah.
But all theirs are weird.
They cry out to heaven for vengeance, though.
Exactly. Unlike mine.
Unlike mine.
Which are great.
Yeah.
They're perfectly normal and natural. Well, see, this is part of the problem with the whole isolation thing. No, ladies and gentlemen, none of our sins are natural.
Oh, you're going soft on them, on those people.
Yeah, well.
And no, I mean, that's what people are going to say. You're going soft.
What, by insisting that they're human beings with sinful natures?
By comparing them to us, that theirs aren't more serious.
Well, let me put it this way. They're as unnatural as ours often are, especially when you add contraceptives. Oh, yes. I mentioned the C word.
Ooh, I'm uncomfortable now.
It's going to get worse. All those contraceptives, dumping all those hormones into the environment. I wonder why the amphibia all over the place are changing gender. Why could that be? Could it be, well, you know, the active ingredients in contraceptives, they don't vanish. They go through a woman's body and into the sewage and into the environment. You knew that.
I didn't think about that. Okay.
Well, think about it. We have never had so much of that stuff being dumped into the natural environment before now. Is it a surprise that amphibia, who are the most sensitive of all the animate objects, you know, beyond vegetables, is it any surprise that they should be undergoing these weird changes when subjected to all this crap? But you won't hear about that, will you?
It's not natural. It's just not. It's. I don't know anything about this. I don't know. All I remember on this is I can sum it up. Jurassic Park in the 90s, where the raptors change and they breed because of an African frog that was known to spontaneously change genders naturally.
Well, they do have a few species like that.
Yeah.
But there have been amphibian species that do not change naturally, although they've been changing. So the question is why?
Okay.
Something in the water, I suppose.
There's something in the water. Okay. Okay, gosh, this has been perhaps our longest episode ever. Based on
boy.
The time. But last question.
Oh.
And it's a Save the Best for Last by Jake.
Okay, Jake.
What is the Catholic Church's position on space colonization? Are human beings supposed to populate the universe, or does God have different plans for those planets?
You know, I wish I was the spaceman, the fastest guy alive. I'd fly you around the universe on Fireball XL5. Way out in space together, conquerors of the skies. My heart would be a fireball. A fireball. Every time I looked into your starry eyes. I grew up on space travel. You bet. My generation was going to go to the moon. Well, sort of. We did get to the moon, but we didn't colonize it. And after Apollo 16, was it? We didn't go back. Now they've discovered there's water on the moon. Wow, we didn't know that when I was a kid. You know, there's water on Mars. Will we ever get there? I don't know. It's a long ways away. C.S. Lewis was a believer that the immense distances of space were God's quarantines to keep us where we are. I don't know. It may be that just as human ingenuity took us across the ocean to the Americas and brought the faith with us, same as the Far East and Asia, it may be that we will, in fact, one day colonize the moon and perhaps Mars. Maybe not. I really don't know. The church has no particular teaching about it. Obviously, if we do colonize those places, the church will have to go with us. I've always been fascinated with Mars. You can't help it. Growing up as a kid and reading Edgar Rice Burroughs and Ray Bradbury and Lynn Carter, you know, you can't help but be fascinated with the whole idea of Mars, the angry red planet.
Yeah.
And Percival Lowell and the Martian canals, and I mean, all this stuff. Who knows?
So the Catholic Church has no position on space colonization.
No, not at all. If it happens, then they'll have one. Until it happens, then there isn't one.
Okay.
Will it ever happen? I don't know. Would I like to go to Mars? You bet.
Really?
I'd love to go to Mars.
I would hate to go to Mars.
Oh, I'd love to go to Mars. I mean,
why?
Presuming there was already a colony established.
What's in Mars?
Well, as I say, presuming there was a colony established in the comforts of hope. But no, to walk on the soil of another world, that would be amazing to me. Absolutely amazing.
There's so much wildlife and nature here to explore before you care about the dirt on Mars.
Well, firstly, for those of us whose ancestors come from Mars, we would find your characterization very upsetting.
Oh, okay.
All right. Just because we had to come here doesn't mean we've lost our love for our home world. You know, you've got to understand that.
Got it.
So it's a few million miles away. When I look up at that beautiful red planet from whence we came.
Got it.
I'm sorry, this didn't come out the way it was intended. I told you we had the DNA done.
Well, we're definitely getting. It's been too long of an episode. We're getting out there now. We're getting wacky. We're getting goofy.
We're getting a few million miles out there. Is what
we're out there right now.
Yeah, out there in the asteroid belt. Well, you know, the one thing I can say for space colonization is that if we are ever in, as a planetary culture, if we're ever in a position of really having to become the ultimate consumer society, gosh, you could dump all the productivity of Earth out there and never come to the end of it.
Yeah.
But to do that, it would require a political situation that would be far more docile than it is right now, which is why all of the fantasies about this kind of stuff usually see some sort of world government and so on and so forth. And looking at the players in government today and the players in the UN, I can only imagine what that kind of government would be like. Although probably they would not be pushing for birth control the way ours do, because if you want ultimate consumption, you need ultimate labor.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's who's to say? I can't. I don't know. What I do know is that it is in human nature to constantly push outwards. That's why we settled the New World. That's why we went to Africa and Asia and so on. At least, if not human nature in general, it's been the nature of Western man. And I know that sounds culturist or whatever you like, but there's a reason why the other cultures did not colonize the planet. There's a reason why European man did.
What about the Pacific Islanders? Hello.
What about them? They got colonized too.
They expanded, and they
did.
They went on brave adventures in the ocean, and
They sure did, but not much further. I mean, You've got the Kwakiutls in British Columbia, who is supposed to be Polynesian descendants.
Hawaii isn't far. Hawaii's
Oh, of
pretty
course it's far.
far.
It's far, but they didn't go beyond into the continental United States into South America. I mean, there was some interaction, but not a lot. They stayed on the islands.
I know, but their
Easter Island was
the
very
human
far.
spirit, quote unquote, took them as far, but they just didn't have the technology with those primitive boats.
Well, that's true, but the Europeans were driven in that way for whatever reason.
Okay.
It was their drive. I don't know why. I mean, there were Asian naval explorers like Admiral
resources
Cheng
and
Ho.
exploitation. I mean, it's all about the gold, right?
Boy, I've got
Colonization and exploitation.
I have a sudden desire to smack people around. All of a sudden, I just want to rip their hearts out and offer them to Huitzilopochtli.
That's how we can do that. We're sending money back. It's a profitable franchise.
Yeah, okay. As I say, time to start to switch to an indigenous language and get rid of all these European trappings. Exactly. You see, only the European mindset could even broach the problem. Have you noticed that the descendants of the West African kings, until very recently, never expressed any guilt over selling the slaves to the New World? The whites have shown all sorts of guilt over buying them, but the blacks never showed any guilt over selling them until very recently.
Okay.
Even the concept was European. The concept of guilt over it was a European concept.
Okay.
So if you really want to break with European hegemony over the mind, stop feeling guilty over historical events. Because I guarantee you no one else does. You're going to get a lot of apologies out of the Muslim world for, I don't know, the slaughters at Tiberias and Acre. Oh gosh, I guess not. It's a purely European thing. And it's projection. So,
okay.
Please. It's even, I mean, I remember with the South African apartheid regime, our press and media and all that would be jumping up and down apartheid in South Africa. Well, they didn't mind genocide in the rest of Africa, in any other country it took place in. And I presume it's because they were racists and held whites to a higher standard than blacks. Oh, well, what do you expect? They're only blacks. Of course, they're slaughtering each other. Well, that's what they're saying, isn't it? If you say that apartheid was worse than genocide, that's what you're really saying. That blacks were simply incapable of doing any better and could not be held to the same standard. And that, my friend, is as racist as it gets.
Wow. Definitely some red pills, dropping some truth bombs right now.
Look at Robert Mugabe, who just died. You know, the head of Zimbabwe. He ran that country into the ground and caused all sorts of starvation and so on for its people. Why are we not allowed to say that? Why weren't people outraged? Well, because it was only blacks doing it to blacks. You know, please, save your anti-Columbus, anti-colonialism crap until you're willing to stand up and acknowledge those things. Okay. Oh, and one other thing, if you're at Oxford University and you don't like Cecil Rhodes and you're on a Rhodes Scholarship, drop it right now. If Rhodes was such an evil, terrible man, don't take his lousy money. Show us how pure you are. And that goes for you too, Bill Clinton, who was a Rhodes Scholar.
Okay. Any more axes to grind? Boy, you're really on a roll right now.
Well, you know, I probably shouldn't. I mean, we've been here later than ever.
Yeah.
It's the 2.5 hours. God bless us all.
Yeah.
Do we have any books?
No books. It's too much like hard work. I knew this was going to be a long episode.
All right. Well, then I have this much to say while we're on the topic of race. Don't forget, September 9th is Monday. Or is it? No, it's Sunday. No, it's Monday. That's right, because it's Saturday here already. It's after midnight here.
Yeah.
So Monday the 9th is the Feast of St. Peter Claver. And speaking not only as a Knight of Columbus, but as a proud Knight of Peter Claver, shout out to all my brothers in the order. And speaking on racism and everything else, St. Peter Claver is the example to follow. The slave of the slaves, he called himself. At the end of the day, all of these issues can only really be resolved by sanctity and nothing else.
Okay. Oh, one last announcement. We're every week now, so we've hit our goal, our $1,000 goal. Yay!
Happy days are here again. The skies above are clear again. Let us sing a song of cheer again.
All you fanatics, you can get that routine down. If it's Monday, it's off the menu. You wake up, get a cup of coffee, flip on off the menu. There you go. You can get yourself in that rhythm again, finally.
Boy, woo! Every Monday. Wow.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough, but you know what? You're worth it, and you've proved it.
Yeah. And but we still could use more patrons. Still definitely could. Can never have enough patrons. We have another goal. I do have another goal set up at a higher tier. If we hit that goal, then I'll be interviewing other people of note. I'm open to suggestions from patrons, but I personally was thinking someone like Joseph Pierce, someone like that. So keep on coming in, patrons. Thank you so much. And that'll do it for this episode.
And remember, if it's Monday,
it's off the menu.
The soul you save
may be your own.
God bless and good night.